So we're moving to Lochlea, and it's great to meet you again, John. I haven't seen you for a few years, and you've been involved in this experiment. So it's welcome to Holyrood Distillery.
Yeah, no, thanks. Good to be here. First time here as well, so really excited and getting all the smells and the atmosphere of Holyrood. So no, it's exciting to. I don't know, if you're in whisky, it's always exciting to see kind of how everyone does things and just get a feel for the place as well. So good to be here.
Aye. Well, I mean, just thinking about the book and thinking about your starting point for joining this great and crazy experiment. I mean, what was your starting point? When you looked through, you went, this is the route I want to take.
I guess like it was a collaboration. Like me, I have I guess probably different experiences and more kind of varied, like especially in the floor malting side, so that had to go in. We had already done it at Lochlea in a very agricultural fashion, but so like we had experience, so we could do that, and I think a few of the other distilleries could, but that was more like, well, you do that and that'll be a separation point between us. And then just as we kind of developed it through, we changed everything at Lochlea but the cut points and the stills. So we just ran the stills the same, but malting, mashing, fermentation were all different. So
you just decided to go all in.
Yeah, no, and I guess the interesting thing for I guess to find out fully would be have to change the cut points, but like we wanted to keep some kind of semblance of kind of Lochlea in it, as well as kind of the methods from 100 years ago.
Yeah. You'd lots of experience of floor malting, so what did you take out of the book that was so different from how you floor malted now?
Yeah, so the couches are definitely the thing that are different, and it must just have been to do with barley varieties, or the change in barley and how it malts over the last 100 years. So couches, they were required at Lochlea this time as well, because it was -4 when we were floor malting in December. So yeah, they were handy, and we needed it, and we got some great pictures of that as well. Me with the mashing probe kind of sticking into these big couches, and they were like 1, 2, 3 ton deep as well. They needed to be big to just get the barley going. So whereas normally barley nowadays you just basically have to it goes itself, and then basically you have to put the brakes on it. So it's a different way of doing things.
So that'll speak to the maltster of that era taking longer to malt anyway, because it's more to speak to the variety.
I think so. I think it's just the way I think grains have been developed to suit kind of malting now as well, to speed up, because there's a lot of commerce and kind of finance involved with that. So if it takes them kind of say 10 days or 14 days, that's quite a lot of like cycles over a year that these maltings can get through. So I think probably the development of grain has moved in that direction, and both that processability and yield. So whereas it was all about flavour 100 years ago, like yield just wasn't a thing.
It was a consideration, but
not the main factor. Yeah. So like and there's like it's still not the main factor. It's always about quality, I feel, but like the balance is kind of more between yield and quality nowadays.
Yeah.
So how difficult was it? How did you approach then the rest of the floor malting? Given.
Yeah, no, it's basically you just had to let it go, and just stay in the couch. I think we left it for 2 days in couches, and so it needed it at that temperature as well. And then the job then, once it gets going, is to put the brakes on this, try and slow it down. So that either means spreading it out nice and thin, or turning it to just kind of get the air through it. So we didn't have proper turners, we just had ploughs as well. So it just meant a lot of physical work, basically, to try and get it settled again. And then once you've got it in the flow that's nice, you're away. But it did take a few kind of ups and downs. And I would say that was the thing throughout the process. There was just doing things differently. That's the great thing about doing things differently. You're learning on the fly, so you're adjusting and that's a good thing about me using that experience to know, right, okay, we're on track again, or we're off track, and how do we do it?
Yeah. So you weren't really flying blind at that point?
No, like...
Maybe one eye shut.
You've never malted, aye, probably, because I've never malted in -4, so like that was tough, and it just took a while to get it, for it to be happy, and I had to give it a wee cuddle, and then it was okay. It just started kind of growing nicely then, and then the job was, say, to slow it down. So yeah, no, it was interesting. It was just, it was interesting.
Did you have an idea of, in your mind, of what you wanted to produce?
Yeah.
Yeah, flavour-wise.
Definitely, and I guess that's the good thing about the experience as well. I knew the process, like, so if you've been in this industry long enough and you've kind of learnt a few things, when you know the spirit you want, you just work your way back. And it's just, because it's just building on the process. But in whiskey, you start at the end and work your way back to the beginning. So this one, like, I knew, like, that I wanted floor malted spirit, what that would provide, the nice kind of fuller, kind of creamier liquid, and that nice cereal character that you'll get. And then you move on to the next stage, and the milling. We milled it slightly differently as well, just because floor malted grows differently. So we kind of changed the milling about a bit to leave it nice and a bit chunkier as well, so that we could get nice clear wort in the next stage. And then adding in so the mashing was slightly different, but not too much. And we just basically did lower gravities as well in the mashing. So we went back to the gravities of 100 years ago, so 1050 to 52, versus like we are 1061 now. So it's quite a different kind of strength of sugar in the fermenter. And then we added an Old English ale yeast, which that's the bit where I felt most out of control in the whole process, I would say.
All right, right.
Yeah, just the temperature, the maximum temperature it could take was 24, 25 Celsius. And so we were adjusting, we were setting it. Again, it was January this time, by the time we're processing. Again, just because we wanted really cold weather to get that nice kind of floral note coming through in the spirit that you're getting when the cooling is really cold. So we got that, but equally we would just trying to, the fermentations were all over the place, really, the first 2 or 3 days, and then we started to, like, I thought we were out of control a wee bit, because they were just going a wee bit too hot and stopping. So we were setting it, I think it was 13.5 Celsius at the beginning, and it was just too hot. It was just, they were just going too hot. And I think a factor of that is the fact that the stills, the design of Lochlea, the two stills are sitting at the end of the kind of fermenters as well. So that was giving us latent heat. So that was we had to figure this out because it was really sensitive. So we basically got down to 12.5, 13 Celsius, and then by the end of the first week we'd hit a nice sweet spot. But because we were cooling, the time had to expand. So that's kind of why it says we started off at 90 hours, thinking that'll be a nice sweet spot and not end up too grassy in the fermentation. But we ended up at 168 hours a week. We ended up at a week just because the fermentation was just so slow at that point. So, and it's amazing how even that 1.5, 2 Celsius made a difference in the kind of the lag in the fermentation, and then how it performed after that. But we hit a real sweet spot then, and we got good fermentations.
So again, he was essentially learning on the job, you know.
Yeah, and
we've got a problem here. Okay, right, let's resolve it.
And it added in a nice different flavour in the new spirit too, which I wasn't expecting. So there's a nice kind of minerality in the new spirit that you don't, just because they're a week long fermentation.
That's incredible.
It's fascinating because in the modern terminology, a long fermentation is it short and left to ripen or that, but we've heard from a few that it was a long fermentation. Yeah,
I think if you use I think quite a lot of them have used kind of lager or ale yeast, which was the yeast at the time. I think the DCL yeast was just kind of getting invented around that time too. So there wasn't really a distiller's yeast as such. So I think that's just what everyone had to do. That was the cards you're dealt. So you have to react to that, and that was really interesting. And you could put yourself, I guess, and that was the bit I really wanted was to try and kind of get into the headspace of what it would be like to distill 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, certainly the fermentations put you in that spot, because they were very kind of sensitive, and you had to pay a lot of attention to them.
While you were watching it all the time, rather than, okay, right, I know what's going to happen, I can essentially leave that for
you would be watching it
60
every
hours
kind
or
of,
whatever.
no, a couple of hours.
Really?
When you were there, every couple of hours, just to see how it's like, is it even moving? Is it working? Is it doing anything? Or is it going too fast? So you were trying to really gather data, really, to make your decisions, instead of trying to be a gut feel.
Yeah.
Or was it a bit of both? Was there an element
there is, because you're not,
intuition in there?
Lochlea isn't kind of 24/7 distillery. We work Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. So you had to basically leave it overnight and come back in. So, but hopefully you'd gather enough information during that kind of 8 hours or I stayed longer, a couple of days, just to see, because we were getting it wrong. It just needed more effort and more time to try and figure it out in my head.
And it's interesting you kept the cut points the same in the distillation.
Yeah, no, and that was really just to try and be able to do a head-to-head measurement, so that you would understand the variation in each stage, but keeping the cuts and the stills the same, so we could understand the difference as much as anything else. And then it was just a good reference, because we had done a lot of work on cut points 2 years previously, so we had spent a lot of time trying to really find the sweet spot for Lochlea, and so we felt we had it, and so we just thought we'd keep it the same, just to try and get that comparison.
Yeah. So you can trace that minerality to something that's
it was the week-long fermentations.
Yes.
No, that's where it came from. Yeah.
So what have you taken from all of this? Is there anything that can be? I mean, it's been a fascinating experiment, but is there anything that you are thinking, oh, hang on a minute, I can then utilise this in Lochlea going forward?
Yeah, no, lots. So I would say the yeast is the interesting thing. It's probably one of the least, in kind of general, the least talked about areas of the industry. Doesn't experiment much at all with it. It does and it doesn't, but it's not really. There's a lot of kind of so many different ways you can do things, because water you could change things slightly too, but barley, there's been a lot of experimentation with barleys and types and peated, non-peated, like all different kinds of things. So yeah, the yeast bit was kind of really interesting, and I learned probably more there because you don't do week-long fermentations in the kind of general way, and it's not what you're taught, it's not anything like that, so you're just learning that. So I think things like that. I'd also like to change the cut points. I'd like to do it again and change the cut points.
Right.
So, but just sit there with it, like 100% all the way through the run. So like when you're setting up a cut point, it's usually every 2.5 minutes you take a sample. So you then end up like, that's the place to go on, this is the place to go off. So I wonder about how much more of the kind of, there's a nice kind of, I feel there's a stone fruit bit, but it's kind of earthy, and I've never felt that in the new spirit before, and that minerality. I was wondering if we kind of cut a bit deeper, would that be more prevalent, or just what other flavours that we missed out on? So that would be the bit I would probably want to understand more, just follow it.
But it is that incremental change, you know. You now know how the ferment
Yes.
behaves. So the next stage will be
just the distillation to change that, because like you're thinking maybe every 2.5 minutes, it doesn't change that much. It does in distillation. It's huge the change that can happen in 2.5 minutes, it's dependent on rate as well. So, but like, because we distill really slowly, but even every 2.5 minutes there is a change in where the spirit is at. So to collect from different places, you'll change the overall outlook on the spirit.
How do you think that whisky will mature?
I think it'll do really well. I'm like I would be excited to see it develop. Because one thing we need to try and like it's at the top of the valley in Ayrshire there, so like we get nice kind of winds kind of blowing up that valley all the time, coming up from Prestwick. So I think there will be I do think there is a different kind of maturation profile at Lochlea. It's another thing to find out with this, because we're all using similar casks, so like we can see even hopefully some geographical variation in the maturations and what that adds to the spirit as they develop. So we should maybe even just chuck a couple of casks at Lochlea into maybe Arnhem and Holyrood, and then you'll get the kind of, you'll understand that local variation as well. Yeah. So, but like, I think it'll mature really well. It's a really good new spirit. Really happy with where it turned out in exactly the area I thought it was going to be. So yeah, and it's completely different to Lochlea, completely different. Even though there are probably 3 or 4 changes in the process, and that's it. 3 or 4 changes.
It's extraordinary, actually.
Yeah, taking your kit to make something different.
Yeah. No, and that's the interesting bit about all of this, because like a lot of the stuff has stood the test of time too.
Yes.
So a lot of these methods are still used today, maybe slightly refined, but it's the same thing ultimately that we are doing. And so a lot of these processes, when I was at Laphroaig, we did in 2003, I'd researched 100 years back on Islay through the records as well, and created this whisky for the bicentennial celebrations, the Carchis, and it was basically what Laphroaig did 100 years previously too. So this project kind of brought back a lot of memories and kind of what I was doing with that project. So yeah, it's just really, really interesting.
Lower gravities.
Yeah. Balanced distillation, which Laphroaig hasn't had since the 1960s. We did all of these different things that they had back in that time. So it was all, and that's what I'm saying. This book just kicked a lot of that back, and equally, it's just amazing how like the processes are the processes as well. And we do refine things, but you don't. How much of an improvement it is? It's kind of small.
Was there any kind of big surprises in the book for you?
Probably just that like a good process is a good process. And that's like, well, it's over 200 years old now, this process of making whiskey, and 600 years old almost in some aspects. So and even if you go back to probably China 2,000 years ago, it's similar processes that each country has used to distill their own amber nectar. So and it's just, there's evolution, but it's incremental, I would say, as well.
And that's the interesting thing is, for me, is how much you can learn from the past. That rather than whiskey kind of being blinkered and going, actually, we're only going forward because science allows us to understand more, technology allows us to, and we'll forget about the past, but actually the past is alive.
I think a lot of the kind of newer distilleries are learning from the past and installing some of these kind of slightly forgotten or just slightly different processes as well, and definitely it's something at Lochlea we're looking to do as well. So like try and get that kind of almost fully sustainable site, like grow the barley, malt it, just do everything all on one site, so that just bottles disappear off the site and that's it.
I think Scotch is at a really interesting point in its evolution. There does seem to be this movement underway that's looking at new ways of making whiskey, and which might be old ways of making whiskey, but actually asking. There seem to be more questions being asked, I think, about what the potential flavours could be.
And a lot of that comes from customers now. Customers are just much more educated. I think the internet's changed the whiskey game as well with that fact. So people have much more information at their fingertips, and so they'll try and apply that and just ask and demand kind of answers to their questions from the businesses. So you have to respond to your customers, otherwise you're not going to be in business. So
and also, I suppose there's more distilleries around, so you've got to find ways to quality ways to cut through.
Competition's higher, yeah. You have to get your message cut through, and whatever that you think that is, whether it be, I don't know, whether it is in whatever angle you're taking, that's your kind of character, I guess. So like people want to understand that character and get a bit of kind of underneath kind of who you are. The whiskey's got to taste good ultimately as well. The character, just people can attach themselves to that character and like to attach themselves to that character as well nowadays. Although they can be kind of slightly promiscuous as well, because some days it's just a Dave Broom day and some days it's an Alan Winchester day. So like, and that's the same with whiskies. So do you know what I mean? So like, yeah, some days you just want a big cast strength and a slap in the face, and some days you just want to just sit back and just let the world drift away.
Yeah.
So,
Am I the slap in the face and he's the
no,
drift away?
no. You can decide that between you. Yeah.
The other thing I often think is the other way. I wonder what they would be thinking of what we're up to just now. You know, their understanding of how they were making whiskey, and if they could see what they were doing, a lot of the old guys I'd worked with would have been saying, God, yeah, what a lot you are.
Aye. No,
But
it's true.
I would be fascinated.
Aye.
Yeah.
No, nostalgia, like, you can't underestimate the power of nostalgia either.
Yeah.
I think that Everton's never rained in the summer when I was a kid, did it? So, it's just one of those things. I think nostalgia does, and Everton's, yeah. Everton was always better in the past, and I think it's a balance nowadays. I think you can't do some of the things you did in the past environmentally, for example, but equally you want to keep the quality aspects so you'll try and find a way around the fact that, for example, the one I can think of, coal-fired distillation, produced this really heavy kind of spirit that you just don't get now, and so if you can try and work a way around that, where you can pull a bit more weight into the spirit that's not burning coal, you should try and do that.
That's right. Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? People still want the quality, but they don't want the input. So I think that's how I would say things have developed, and it's probably more demands coming from customer, but I think that's a positive as well, because it's really good to get that feedback if you are in business. I would say it's positive.
And it's also, I mean, what's coming out of all of these discussions is the relevance of this book. You know, that it's not just a historical document that's intriguing and, okay, right, we can do these experiments, but it's actually relevant to today's distiller, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
No, it's hugely relevant, and it's the same with me. I've learned a lot about this, and even I think the thing you learn the most is things are quite similar, but this was why they did it and why they had to do it, so you can understand development over the last 100 years, why it's developed, how it's developed, and kind of how things have come. But equally, I would still say it's a spirit forward business as well. It's all about it is all about the quality of the liquid you produce, and that's how you're judged at the end of the day. So I still, as you were back then, it's still that. It's just the way they had to do it, and I think you're right. I think you can learn a lot from these things, and even just the things that have changed as well, and why they have changed and why they couldn't be continued. So you understand all of that as well. So I think and it's a historical factual book, so you can it's a learning book as well, I would say as well. Yeah.
You're not thinking of distilling bananas then?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Been always looking for that banana.
Oh, thanks so much for being part of this.
Yes.
You know,
No, it's really exciting for us too. It's been great fun. Again, lots of learning, and even just when Leon called about the book and what you're thinking, it was just oh, all right, I've done a wee bit of this before. I'll tell you about this, and this is kind of what we did. And then the whole collaboration with the James Eadie team has been fantastic, and gets us to learn a wee bit more and find out a wee bit more, and the liquid's there now. The historical.
Look forward to try it.
Yeah.
Great.
Well done to you and the Lochlea team.
Yeah.
You were quite a secretive place for a long time, and you fairly came onto the scene. So,
Yeah.
and thanks for collaborating with us.
No, brilliant. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Well,